Not yet. Okay. Nice. Okay, so welcome to episode 121 of the Overdose and Chill. This is my first time. I'm Seth. I'm the general manager of Overdose Australia, and I'm joined by Justin, one of the triple OGs in the ecom game. He's now kind of gone on to bigger and better things, but today we'll be talking about the history of Netstarter. Now, that was an agency which was, and its highest prominence was the biggest in APAC. It was a huge success and one of the biggest players in Magento. But before we get into this, I guess we are broadcasting live on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you have any questions or anything you'd like us to address, again, please leave them in the comments like we have in the past, and we are happy to jump in and answer. So, I guess, Justin, tell us a bit about yourself. What happened with Netstarter, the history behind it, and how it came to be?
Well, first of all, I knew that would happen the minute this started, the construction next door, so sorry about that. You guys must be at the bottom of the barrel with these podcasts to have me on the show now to talk about it. But really, you must be running out of clients, interesting people in the space.
But you're my first choice. You can, I was trying to get through to you for a very long time.
Well, I don't know if we were like the biggest or the best. We were probably definitely one of the first though, because it was something we fell into. I mean, our journey sort of goes back. The Netstarter journey goes back to the mid 90s, I'd say. Like, when we were still, year 9, year 10 at school, and we fell into the IRC world of, online chatting when the internet was such a new thing. We were like sort of the first generation of kids to actually have the internet. And that sort of dictated everything we did, and we started messing around with it and playing around and learning the ropes. And I think it was more one of those things for me, when I was sort of 16, 17, I was useless at every job I did. Like when my parents sort of encouraged me to do something, and tried working at a gas station. I tried working as a dish pig, and I was pretty average at everything. And I think, we were lucky. We sort of fell into this world of doing messing around with web really, really early on. And we found a really good thing. We started off doing wedding websites, bar mitzvah websites, all these sort of random things in the late 90s. And yeah, it was like a really good cash cow. It was new. Everything was brand new. No one had domain names. No one had websites back then. And we were sort of like the first to be doing it in our sort of community and group and, in Australia. And sort of by the time we were literally, when we finished year 12 back in 1998, we would started doing these websites. We're like, holy shit, we'd go to a wedding, we'd take photos, we'd scan with one of those old school scanners, and we'd build a web page, and we'd charge like $3,000, and we'd get paid cash. And we thought it was insane, the type of money we were making back then as, sort of being 17 years old. And we carried that through. So, I went off to uni and did accounting and finance. And one of my good friends and co-founding the business when we started, he did a BIT scholarship and was exposed to ASP programming really early on. And our sort of parents encouraged us and said, guys, look, I know you're at uni and you think you're going to get like an undergrad job, but what you're doing right now, you should sort of pursue it. And that's what we did. So we thought, hey, we'll have a crack at this. Let's start like becoming a web design agency. Now you kind of say web design agency and you shudder, you think about them. But then it was, you had to explain to people what it was. But
and it sounds cool too, right?
Well, not in these days. Like, didn't help with the ladies too much. But anyway, but I'll tell you what was our first huge mistake. I should be worth so much more money. But back then, when we thought, hang on, we're making a bit of money here, right? We need to get our own website and we need to build this up. What's a cool name, we should get? But what you have to remember is back then, almost everything was available. We could have got webdesign.com, you know, like it was just so many generic domain names that today would probably be worth like $500,000, and every 5-digit, you know, sort of 5-character domain name was available. But Michael and our partner, we sat down and thought long and hard about it, and like registered the most obscure, stupid domain name, which we thought was genius. It was originally called .comet, like actually now I think about Netstarter was probably worse, but the idea was like, you know, .comet, get it online quickly, and .com IT, and we got the .com domain name, and you know, we sort of set it up, and we started off doing weddings and like small little projects, and then what sort of transpired from there is we'd find out, like, you know, some dads of our friends' dads would say, "Oh, look, you know, I've got a business. Can you make, you know, can we have a homepage, an about us page, and like a picture of what we do?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure, we can do that." And we sort of started doing these little corporate websites, and it was the emergence of Flash, you know, around that period, where it really sort of blew people's minds. You know, when like their logo moved or spun around, or there was like a ray of light effect, and there was no like education or training or course or anything like that back then. So you just sort of, we were messing around, learning it, sort of in a way, sort of pioneering what was going on, and going to buying books from like Ariel Bookshop and getting a CD that came with it, and learning how to do these sort of effects. And, you know, we did our first corporate website and make like 10 grand. And we're like, holy shit, you know, like that took us Saturday afternoon, and we each made 5 grand
like we're
doing nothing. Yeah, we're rich, and, you know, like buy a motorbike, you know, like do this type of random stuff. And so we did that the whole way through uni, and it was great. You know, we had no overheads, no costs, and it was a really sort of fun time, and it was just luck. We got into it, and, you know, sort of fast forwarding a little bit how we got into the e-commerce side of things. It was originally myself and my co-founder Michael when we started it together, and then we had 2 other friends join us. So it was the 4 of us when we did the business. But the way the 2 other joined us was we had one big night. This would have been like, I don't know, like 2000 or, you know, around then, and we had a huge night. And I grew up on the North Shore, and I crashed at my friend's house, and that morning, like I got up and, you know, didn't say hello to him. I ended up chatting with his dad. You know, his dad had a successful business and a really good operation. And he comes into the study and he's like, "What are you guys talking about?" to me and his dad. And I'm like, "Oh, no, we're going to help your dad, like, do his website." And he's like, "Dad, what are you doing?" And then anyway, he saw like this proposal I'd given his dad like $10,000 or something. And he was like, "Dad, there's no fucking way you're paying him 10 grand. Like, I'll do it." And that's sort of what happened. That's how Craig and sort of Sean sort of fell into our path of doing, you know, the website stuff. And we decided in those days, look, you know, 2 is better than 4, and they sort of joined us in our office. We'd already had an office at that point, and sorry about the noise. And we started doing that, and we incorporated the first couple of years was a bit more, we did a lot of web development. Obviously that was the main focus, but we would do like the server installs and the, you know, in those days, Microsoft Exchange servers, and we would buy computers from Chinatown, build them ourselves, and go and install them for people. But by about 2002, 2003, we had built our own content management system. And that's sort of how it worked in those days. Like all those early agencies, you peddled your own platform, you know. So ours was ASP originally. You would meet these little businesses. We were young, 21, 22, 23, and we'd say, "Hey, let us demo what we've built." And, you know, that's sort of how you'd win clients. And we quickly, I think, you know, like, you know, we were successful, but I think we missed out on so many huge opportunities at the time. Like, so we built our own platform. Michael had a really good opportunity where he did a BIT scholarship, and he got sent over to the US to learn .NET when it first sort of began. And he was exposed to that in its infancy, learned a lot, you know, from, you know, good structure through Dimension Data in the day. And we decided, look, we're going to go build our whole platform on .NET. We'd learned this, and we built in 2004 like a centralized CMS platform, which, to be honest, is not too like different to like a Shopify or a BigCommerce today. And it was built with a Microsoft SQL Server database. And our idea was, you know, how do we go out there and roll these sites out for a relatively low amount and make money on the hosting and licensing side of things. So it was kind of, I guess, pioneering in the day versus building bespoke systems for each customer. And we got to having, sorry, man.
How did you support your content sites?
Well, to be honest, in the early days, we were building the platform and doing all the implementations ourselves. And I think we were kind of like a victim to our own success to a degree, like our own mediocre success. By 2005 or six, we had about 2,000 clients paying us between 50 and 150 bucks a month. And that was on our platform. And basically what we would do like, we had different packages. Go into the Wayback Time Machine and you'll see it's comical when you look at them now, but we had like a net presence, a net start, like, a starter package. And then we had like a commerce package, which was for e-commerce. But I think, we built up and we got a lot of traction in the day and we got a lot of good clients and we were sort of focused on building our own platform. But I think that the issue we had is we were still so young at the time. We didn't understand about raising money and scaling, and we did everything ourselves. So, we were sort of hindered by what we had between the four of us, and we hired a few guys locally early on, even before Sam's day. And our plan, which we thought was genius at the time, was, look, we can't attract really good .NET developers to come work for us building our platform because we're like 23, 24 years old and no one's got any interest in doing that. They're all working over at Dimension Data and these, Telstra and these big organizations. So we thought, we actually had a company buy a small side of our business, and it was a Sri Lankan guy. And he said, what, boys, if you're going to do this, you should consider building a team offshore. And if you're going to do that, I'd go Sri Lanka. It's a cool country. Maldives is amazing. There's great surfing, great place to travel, and unemployment rates high. For that one reason, we thought, yeah, sounds cool. We'd do that. And we literally stuck up an ad in the Observer paper, and we hired our first, our first guy. I remember Mershid and Rasiko, a designer and a developer. Both, like, Mershid probably wasn't the best developer at the time, and Rasiko wasn't the best, but the guys were amazing, and they sort of invested their whole life with us, and that sort of sent us down this pathway of learning how to build an offshore team. And where we were different is we had our own platform, so we had to sort of train these developers to learn our platform in .NET, and that's what we did. But I think the issue we had is we had a little core team building out our platform, which was called Manage My Site in the day. And then what we did is we used our offshore team, and we didn't outsource. We literally went and set up an office from day one, made a really cool culture over there. And we had these guys doing, so in answer to your question, we would do all these little brochure-based sites, but those guys would roll out the site on our platform, and us internally would work on sort of building out our stack. And, when I look back at it now, retrospectively, we were 2004, we were like 23, 24 years old, and we had, 2,000 clients paying us $100 a month. We had a business that was valuable, really valuable. But I think that was kind of the problem. It all sort of started when Sam joined, to be honest. That's where it all started going downhill around that sort of 2007, 8 era, a little bit before him. But what happened was, we kind of got seduced by the big projects. So we had this great platform rolling out. We did our first e-commerce site in 1999. That was organic food. Then we did it on a platform called Miva Merchant, before we built our own. And we sort of thought, this e-commerce thing's interesting. But that was in the day, where it was, they'd submit an order and it was just like an email form. Credit card in the email form, they'd go in, they'd like sort of process it old school way like that, and then, ship the stuff off. But we sort of had an inkling of the e-commerce thing. There was something there, that we could do. So what happened though is, as we started really pushing 2004 into the e-commerce side of things, we had our own platform. We had 2,000 customers. Things were doing really well, but we got seduced by the big clients. So, like Sam, one of Sam's early clients was Hitachi. When we did Hitachi, JVC, these big brands, we started getting waved this dang this carrot of like $100,000, $200,000 implementations. And our focus was doing sort of 2 to 15 grand sites at volume, at speed, and trying to build up an annuity stream, which was, to be honest, a smart way to do things. But, the seduction of having a Hitachi on your portfolio and working, flying to Japan and working on these big projects. big names, and because we weren't funded, we didn't really know how to build a team of 10, 15 guys to develop our platform at the velocity of something like a Shopify does today, So we were kind of chasing our tail, always rolling out sites. But the question we had is, are we a product business or a service business? And we really should have had a golden goose of a product business, but for better or worse, we became a service-based provider, like you guys, like not indifferent to like an Overdose. And as we started getting these bigger clients, we realized, shit, we can't expand our little platform quickly to handle these requirements, and we need to customize for their specific requirements. So we did, like a big investment of time, and it was a centralized platform, so you had all the issues of being on the one big database. This is 2004, remember, very different to how it is now. So that sort of led us down the path of like exploring things. And then when Magento sort of came out in 2008, sorry about that. You'll remember Alan, who is still the holy grail of Alan. We hired. So there's a funny story. We hired Alan in the day, really early on, to fix the computers in the place, because we had like 10, 12 staff, and every time you hired someone back then, you'd have to like build a PC out or whatever. You'd have to like connect them to Exchange, set up their mail, do everything like that. So it was a mission. Alan's job was to do this, and that's what he did for the first 2 years. And we quickly realized that the guy was the most gifted person in our entire business. Like, no question. Whatever he did, he was
jack of all trades. Like, remember when you used to fix your garage key? Like, you just fixed it.
Like remember that day? We had this is fast forwarding a few years, but we had a nice little office in Surrey Hills. We probably had about 25 people at the time, and I remember like we used to have to hire like residential parking. So I got a parking down at the back of a residential block behind our office there, and you'd get in every morning, and there's for this period of time, this dick kept parking in my parking. I was spending like $300 a month with. Every time I'd get in there, he was in there. So I was so annoyed by it. And it was obviously like a tradie doing something. So one day I thought, you know what, screw it. I just literally parked him in. It's like, that's it. Tough. I wrote a note. I'm like, don't ever park here again, And I stuck it on his board, and I went into the office and I forgot about it. And I sort of sat down and we had a meeting. And then I remember sitting in that meeting in a few hours, like the reception would come in and say, oh, there's a very agitated guy calling. He needs you to move his car. So tell him he can wait. I'll be done in an hour or 2 hours. Come back in 10 minutes later saying, no, you got to go. He's super agitated. And I said, you know what? Tell him to wait. Wait. This is the 5th time he's done it to me. I'm sick of it. No, he can wait.
I mean,
I was angry. I was pumped. I waited until about 1 p.m. I built myself up. Walked down, opened my buzzer, the garage door opens, I walk down there and I see the ute, and I see a guy who's like 6'4", 110 kilos, ripped, tattoos on his head, pacing up and down, going, who the fuck are you? I'm like, shit. I said, I am so sorry, mate, like for holding me down here for that long. My boss just sent me down here now. He told me I'm going to move his car. Because he'd blocked in. He's a bit of a, he's a bit of a bastard, my boss. I'll let him know. He's like, you tell him. If I see him, I'll pass that on to him. Move my car quickly, and that was it. But on the way up, I was so flustered running away from the guy. I stepped on my remote control, and I broke it, and I couldn't even open the door to let the guy out. So eventually I got it in. I remember being so flustered, and I got to the office, and I walked in there, and the guy said, like, what's wrong? And I told him the story. And I dropped the remote on the floor. I said, could this day get any worse? And Alan like takes a look at the remote control and he says, give me 20 minutes. He goes down to, he runs down the road there to like JR Turk. He comes back with a soldering iron, puts his glass on, puts the thing back, tapes it up, bang, and the thing, and that was Alan. So Alan was just, to this day, he started off fixing, computers. And then he actually said to us back then, you should, if you want to do this website for this big brand, I think it was like, Weight Watchers or one at the time, and you don't have enough bandwidth to do it on your little MMS platform, you should do it on OS Commerce or Magento. And we're like, oh, PHP, we know nothing about it. And I said, like, they're going to pay. Like, it was a good project, a good budget. I said, Alan, but none of us do PHP. None of us do. He goes, oh, I can do it. I said, do you develop? He's like, yeah, I do it a little bit. So I said, will you do it on Magento? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I said, Alan, you're so busy here. When are you going to do it? He said, I'll do it for you over the weekend. And I was like, So anyway, like we gave it like 2 weeks. He said, give me 2 weeks. And it came back and, we knew nothing about, Zend or PHP or anything in those days. And, all that, even like we were at Microsoft House through and through. And he did that website. I think I paid him like $2,000 or something. The client paid us like 45 grand or whatever it was. And I was like, yeah, this is interesting. This could be our little opportunity to have those sort of custom ones that don't fit within our stack to do it. And, as we did Hitachi, we started it was a snowball effect in those early days. That we didn't have that many great competitors, to be honest. It's not that many in the early days. Some emerged, some really good ones emerged, but we sort of, it just grew really, really quickly. And we did more and more. And because we had learned how to build our own e-commerce platform up in Sri Lanka, we had become sort of experienced at how to train people how to use a platform. And that's what Magento was in those days. It was like the Zen framework. If you could have understood that, you could train people how it worked. And we quickly shifted. And as in a short period of time, we sort of literally within a year, we sort of built having 20 certified plus developers. Magento was just starting the certification program. And we really focused on that, getting that accreditation early on. And that got us momentum, because once we sort of got to 20 plus certified developers, it was like, you guys are the most certified partner globally at one point. And then from there, just for that, just having that sort of mantra of the most certified, we were getting US clients all over the place, and we became really big quickly. And that's where our sort of focus became the more enterprise side of e-commerce,
For those playing at home, this is the days of Magento being on-prem. So it wasn't cloud hosted or anything.
Completely different, so the Magento story is amazing. And I think, I became really close to the founders of that and sort of saw them. We started our business before them. So when I met Roy and Yoav in those early days, the first Magento, this is, in 2010 when I sort of met them, they had a little agency no different to us. In fact, they were just a much smaller version of what we were. In terms of revenue and in terms of projects they did. But what they did, which was quite smart, was, and we should have known, because we actually met the Big Commerce guys when they were, what were they called? They were called something else before Big Commerce. They were like a small agency, and they actually came to our office to see how we were doing things and how we got to 2,000 clients. How do we have so many people on a cloud-based platform? But we were like, that was small fry. Now we're doing all these big projects. And what happened with Magento, they realized, let us focus on the platform, open source, build the community, and let other people do the implementations. Smart way to do it, and where we went the other way around, we went from building the platform to becoming the idiots that did the implementations, which is just, in a way, it's like a one-to-many relationship. You can rather focus on one problem and do it well. When you're doing implementations, you have to deal with dozens of clients, hundreds of clients. And, that's got its own challenges in building up a team and delivering great service the whole way through. But Magento was amazing, in its early days, because, it had a great story. Take ownership of your investment. You can, develop your own stack, build what you need, and sort of separate yourself from the crowd. But, as you guys all know, you were doing complex software development. So that sort of became our DNA, how do we do these good projects? How do we win big brands? How do we deliver them? And sort of became like a 3-horse race, in those days, between E-Wave, who I have heaps of respect for, a good relationship with the guys to this day. Very different now what they've moved into, and balance in those days. And, and then, we sort of ran that, we built that up, and we got to 150 staff, but very different, looking at the maturity of Overdose and how you guys work, we were like, flying blind. We were just young, trying to figure out how to hire people, how to manage teams, how to do sales properly, but to be honest, as it was more like the early days was more just a party for us. It was more like we went out in our mid-20s, good office, having fun. But it was an amazing experience, and we learned a lot, and through the whole thing, and like a lot of great opportunities in there.
I think also that was like a sign of the times back then too, because if you remember back to the Magento days, every client wanted a fully customizable stack to be fitted to their needs. Like, I want to have the most customized back end to do the most customized front end. As it's kind of shifted from then to now, it's become very much like, how do we work with the platform? Therefore, it's going to be less maintenance because you're not customizing core functionality on like a Shopify, for instance.
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been in the agency world now since 2016. Since I worked with you guys, and we were still doing it there. So, but I know it's changed a lot. I think the value proposition in those days was, as I said, take ownership. You've got this kind of blank canvas where you can customize and change it any way you want, and that really resonated with the retailers in the day. Like, oh, okay, great. We can go off on a tangent and do whatever we need to do, but that in itself created challenges, because each project you're probably overcomplicating things. And I remember, like, when I look back at the mistakes I made, I was really good at selling that into people, like anything you want to do in your checkout, anything you want to do in your, the way your faceted search works, anything you're going to do on your upsell, we can develop and build it. And sometimes, not that it was untrue that there was value in doing that, but I think the downside of that is there was a lot of time and effort invested in doing things, and then you would try to manage a source code and like the bugs and issues and ongoing support of it was challenging. Whereas, I'm sure now, you've got like more proven, battle tested sort of stacks and, frameworks for doing things. And, now on my own two brands, being sort of client side, having my own two brands for the first time, investing the dollars and the things that are going to like have an immediate return, is much better. But I saw Sam posted up there, like, how did we get to the developers? I think that was one of the things where we were lucky, where it was just
how to get them certified as well so quickly.
Yeah, like I think because we fell into with our own platform and we had to train the guys to use .NET MMS, we were kind of good at how to find talented, guys, and how to teach, how to get them to a point they were sort of credible, good developers. So our sort of mantra there was, you take something like Magento, for instance. This was emerging new. How do we find Java-based object-oriented developers that have experience there, and then sort of create an opportunity for them in Magento? And we sort of sold into them like, guys, look, this is going to be a big platform. There's going to be a lot of opportunity with a lot of work here. Join us. We will take you through. We'll train you. We'll get you across these really big projects, and then you're going to have a lot of, sort of career value in the sense, once you become, a certified Magento developer, that's a currency, for you. And it was really early on when it started. So I think we pushed it early. So when Magento sort of piloted it, like as a concept, really early on, and we thought, bang, we're going to jump into this hard. And where a lot of the other agencies, probably adopted it a bit slower, we were like, I remember from day one, how do we get to like 30 quickly? Because next time I'm in Vegas at one of these shows, I want to say win the most certified. And that's what we did. And we had a good program for training the guys, getting them through the tests, like a sort of buddying program. And the plan was hire like 2 or 3 rock stars that are unbelievable, in the space, and who they are, and get those guys to get the guys that weren't so good. How do you sort of get the 10s to the 5s to the 7s and 8s? And that's what we did reasonably well. And I think that was our catalyst for sort of growing.
I think back in the day, like we would, projects would be distributed across project managers and like we have teams. But it was so funny when you used to like have a client come through who you would work with directly. Next thing you know, everyone's project.
This is a myth. This is a myth. You probably still complain about this. I just knew yeah, I know. Like, I mean, I must be honest, like everyone, like I still have some clients who say, mate, like it was just an experience when I worked with you. It was exceptional. It would and then something would change and we hand over. And I'm like, look, that's just the way I roll. I'm that talented. But yeah, you're right. Like all I knew is when it was me and I signed the project, I'd walk in and say, Sam says, unfortunately, you're going to be now working with this junior. He's just started. You 3, you with me, and I'll take it from here. And then it'll come to review period. I'd be like, Cez, I don't know. That project didn't go as well as it should have. Look at my 3 over there. Mine are crushing it. Yeah. It
was the worst. So I guess it was 4 of you that kind of started the business, and like all of you had your own skill sets and what you kind of committed to. And I think what you guys did really well is that you really focused on your strengths. I mean, Craig was really good with numbers. So was Michael. You were like the John Jones of sales back then. Then Sean was doing his thing as well. But he also jumped into sales as well. So how did you distribute that, and what was your involvement throughout that journey? Did it shift from being sales to something else, or was it just like sales driven?
Like a lot of us, to be honest, we were directionless. We were we had our own platform that was doing its thing, which we really should have thought could have been like, easily $100 million business, from the momentum we had in those days. But then we had the seduction of this Magento thing growing really, really fast. And we sort of, as I said, went down the Magento path. And in doing that, we had to sort of restructure like what we were doing because it was a different sales cycle. It was, so Sean and I sort of fell like, my background was, I did do a bit of in those early days, like the Flash. That's really what I did, the Flash development and the builds in the early days, and UX to a degree, like the UX design side, as did Sean. So we gravitated more towards selling it in. And then Craig and Michael more on the sort of the technical side. Michael still generally ran, like our MMS was a big platform and we were still really committed to it. So he was sort of responsible for all of that. And then, we tried to, that's what we tried to do. When we started looking, Sam would have been one of our early hires, where we sort of went for a caliber above and we were looking for guys that Sam had a lot of experience, even by our standards, like we've been doing it since 99. Sam had been in this game a long time. So over in the UK. So we try to, the idea was we wanted to like find people that were really solid, like break the skill sets down. So you had like the sort of pre-sales, which we handled internally. Then we wanted to have our account directors, managers that were really sort of solid in handling a relationship. Like, you wanted a guy like where Sam was really good. I don't know why I'm being so nice to him because there's a lot of things he was bad at. But he was good. He could walk into a room like a Hitachi and you just sort of instilled confidence, even though he didn't really know that much. He was one of those guys that could go in there and he was very good at what he did, in that. So we try to do that. And the same, Craig took responsibility for it. How do if we're going to scale this, it can't be us doing all these implementations. How do we build like a team? How do we build these little pods and groups and, the stronger guys that we invest? And then we have this ongoing challenge of upskilling. Because like, as you guys are aware, anyone who runs an agency, to be honest, I'm kind of anti-agency. I think it's because having run one myself, I really admire what you guys have achieved because I think it's difficult. It's kind of getting into when you've got 20 staff, 25 staff is really manageable when you're hands-on, what's going on. When you get to like an Overdose size or you get to an E-Wave size, you have to choose your lane. Like if you look at E-Wave, they've gone enterprise only. So I speak to Carl all the time and they were remarkable. We competed with everything. I used to actually hate them, and we would go in for the big projects. We'd win, we'd lose to them. But Carl always said to me from day one, he had a different approach. He said, look, we want to be like the Deloitte of e-commerce. We want to focus on that consulting approach. We wear suits and ties. And we were like, that's like wankerish, doing that. We were like more and I look back at it and I used to think he was making a mistake, but now I realize, it's horses for courses and they built an amazing business. Like, they've done incredibly well. They really positioned themselves in the high end. They moved a bit more away from the retail side, more to B2B and sort of that sort of $500,000 to $2 million implementation was their sweet spot. With us, as we sort of got past 25 staff and got to, we probably had like 30 to 50 between Sydney and Melbourne in those days. And then we had another 100 plus in Sri Lanka. It's hard, because the reality is the way I always looked at it is like, you have your 18 players all the way down and there's a part for everyone. You can't have an organization where you've got 100, Allens and Nalindas and Allisons and Sams and Cezans. It doesn't work like that, like you have to, it's impossible, to recruit and you don't even know the hardest thing is you also never know who's going to emerge as like Allen. Like who would have ever thought that guy was that guy, So often we would get resumes and you would read it on paper like, holy shit, this guy, like, look at this, he's worked at our 4 biggest competitors, and he's got, he's Magento certified plus. And then they would turn out working for you and they weren't that great. They weren't like incredible contributors for whatever reason. On the flip side, you'd find someone who'd come in zero ego, didn't have any of the credentials. And then within 6 months, like it would, either I would identify it or Sam or anyone on the team would say, mate, this person here is an absolute rock star. And I think that became our focus. How do we sort of have this onboarding process where we can hire people, identify those guys really quickly and try and have a solid team. So when as we're getting bigger and bigger, we can ensure that each of the projects we deliver has got it's not just my little rockstar team and then everyone else gets the leftovers. That was the goal. But I mean, to be honest, I don't think we ever really solved that problem that well. We did well. We were lucky enough to find like a really good partner who acquired us in Salmad, and we were lucky to have a good exit and have a really great experience from teenagers to making some money out of the whole thing and getting out of it. But I think Yeah, to be honest, I always joke with you. You always say to me, if we kept doing it, we could have built a much bigger business. And I think a lot of that's timing, like Shopify is amazing, and like just what you can develop now. So much of our effort was software development, trying to build out a stack, whereas now you can really focus on what the client's challenges are with like an extensible platform where you're not reinventing the wheel each time. It's more just sort of front-end theming, using really good ecosystems of microservices to deliver great function. That's how it's changed. So now I believe there's a value for an agency. You can build great stuff. Whereas us, everything was just custom big projects and nightmare. Challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good kind of story to tell when it comes to the Netstarter thing. What really drew me, I guess, to the agency was the fact it was just a bunch of guys that were just trying to make a difference, I guess. And you were all like super young, super approachable. It was very flat. Like it wasn't like there was like separation between senior management and the team. And that was like that's a big key for me. And I think Overdose is a very similar model, which kind of reminds me a lot of that kind of what we had back then. What do you think was your thing? What was the X factor for the business outside of the Magento kind of onboarding? There was a point where Netstarter just scaled and became like the accelerated growth was absolutely insane. Was that a situation? What do you think was your reason for that outside of Magento?
I think there's a few things. I think so. Obviously, one was just like timing with Magento and there was that wave of brands. Like now, it's a bit more of a challenge for you guys because most mature brands or even like new brands, there's a clear sort of blueprint or playbook to do what you need to do and platforms to deliver that. Whereas at this point, you had a lot of big traditional retailers or decent brands really considering e-commerce for the first time. And they were all going from like a really burnt experience of, I went to some proprietary platform and blew money and it was just a nightmare. So I think we were at that inflection point or that timing where there were a lot of brands saying, look, I'm now ready to invest 50 to 200 grand. Magento seems like the right one. We're ready for it. The second thing I think, as you said, was maybe similar to what we've done with Overdose, similar to Overdose. And this was completely unintentional. Because we were young, like we saw our thing. It was like there was no separation between work and social for us. This was pre-kids. We weren't married at that point. As you guys know, we partied through the business. Our friends were through the business. What we did before and after work all happened through the business. So there was no like managing director, and it didn't work like that at all. It was completely flat. And I think that was part of I guess you guys answered better than I think it was a fun place to work. For all the things we were learning and probably we were immature about, it was fun. We had
made it fun.
It made it fun. And I don't know if it's delusions of grandeur or nostalgia, but even when I bump into people, they always like remember on certain years as being really fun. And I think maybe because they were younger also at that time. We had a really, really good fun time. I think there was a good culture to that extent. And because of that, it allowed us to grow. We were having fun doing what we were doing. We probably missed heaps of opportunities. I just think about like silly things like Afterpay. Huge opportunities we had along the way.
This came in.
I remember. Do you remember that? I remember meeting Nick for the first time, like a young guy from Mariah, a lot younger than me, and I remember he rocked up at our office and he was like sweating, and he sits down and goes, I got this little business idea. And I'm like, we're gonna. It's called Afterpay, and I remember saying, Nick, listen to me. That business will never work. You will never turn $1 profit up in that business. It doesn't work, man. Trust me. Like the margins are too thin. What happens? The interest rates go up. It's a nightmare. You will never ever make $1 profit. Anyway, I'll help you guys out. We had another friend, Larry, who was doing Zip at the time, and we helped the guys up on board, all our merchants, and now I look at it thinking like I was still right. That's very hard to make $1 in those businesses, but at the same, they've built incredible operations. What they've achieved. So we went like I think Carl from Tamando. I don't know if if you were in those early days. The guy was a JB Hi-Fi salesman when I met him, and I remember like he was starting out Tamando, and it was just so interesting being around that time and seeing these guys build like not just good little agency businesses. These guys built like exceptional rock star stories, and it was fun being around through the whole window.
Do you know what I mean? Like, look,
Well, yeah. I remember. Afterpay. Yeah, that's just a different level. But I remember, like, a funny story. I always joke with Carl when we were at when we were with when we were at a Magento conference. We were. This was I think it was 2012 or so, I don't know. Like all they all sort of all those imagines blur together. You know, that was such a wild time. But I remember being there once, and we go there, and they were having it there at Surrender, which was at Wynn Casino, and I was there with my wife, and at the time, and we were going for dinner, and I got an email saying, "Look, there's like an Aussie mafia party happening down here. We've got a room, a room here. You got to come join us." And I lived dinner, like my kids were babies at the time, and I walked down and I queue up to this huge queue. And I'm like, there's no ways I'm getting in here. There's like 100, 200 people at the door, all these glamorous women and guys, and it's not going to happen. It's like I message Carl, and he says, no, just go to the front and say like Aussie Mafia. I'm like, that's so wankerish. I'm like, so anyway, I did. I walked to the front and I said it. The guy didn't know what I meant, and I repeated it. And he eventually like opened up. He opened up the chain, and he sort of sends me through like this back corridor to these private rooms. And I first walk in, open a door, and there's just all these guys. It looked like it was an NBA party or like a NFL party, like these 6'6" guys, like all these huge guys, like in there dancing. All these like women, like it was like it looked like P Diddy was throwing like a 21st. Yeah, like that in there. So I walk in there, and like there's some real dancing happening, and I do the little, through the middle, like walk through, like high fiving, and like, what's this boy doing in here? Like, what's he doing here? I'm thinking like, geez, he's throwing a big party to have all these guys here, and I'm like bumping fists as I walk through, in the haze of smoke. And after 30 minutes, only a guy from Australia, I'm the only white dude in here, I'm in the wrong spot. And I go into the balcony. And I walk into the wrong one. Like their one's in the part, like in the booth next door. Anyway, while I'm standing up there, the guys, like a bell goes off, and they open up a bag, and they start just like showering the place with notes. And it was like this crazy experience. And I walk back down, and I see Carl, and he tells us that they all really pissed at this point. He had just sold the business for like $50 or $60 million, and he says, "Mate, I just got my check." And he says, "Remember, like he goes, I wanted you to like." Be like a seed investor, like what that 20 grand you were going to do, but it was like, oh, you weren't sure if it was going to work, or you were a little bit busy, or maybe you needed that at Netstarter. I should be giving you a check now for like $5 million. And I remember thinking, like 2 years later, but it was crazy. It's like he did that, built countless examples of guys that we saw for that period just build amazing businesses through it, and that was fun. Being part of their success, seeing what went on, and even for us, we had a good exit and no regrets with the whole thing.
Which kind of leads me to my next question. You were at the apex of power, like probably let's just say, probably 2010, 2011, 2012. Right?
Yeah.
When did it, I guess this is a question that I just put a blunt, I guess it's a pretty blunt question, but where did it go wrong? What other mistakes did you make?
Like I don't think anything went wrong. Like I think sometimes we were just a little bit early, with what we did. So like, I think, and maybe again, I'm completely off base here, but I feel that if Shopify was where it was, or we built MMS to where we could have built a scalable business to hundreds of staff, got revenue to, look, I don't know enough about Overdose, and I know you guys are a huge success. Just even where you are, in terms of amount of staff and offices, and how you've exploded on the Shopify scene, in terms of Shopify, big commerce, now into sort of commerce tools and other. But I look at something like an eWave, who was a competitor to us in the Magento days specifically, but they literally did get to the point where they were doing years ago $50+ million in revenue, which is remarkable, And I watched them like side by side us the whole way, and then execute their goal to getting to that point. So I think with us, what happened was, as we got bigger and bigger, because we were sort of we were just organic, we started with zero investment. So getting to a point when you got like a head count of 150 staff, you've got a bench to feed, mouths to feed. So it was always project in and just sort of growing like that versus we never really took a step back and thought, how do we secure, do we need external funding? Do we need an investor? It was always kind of like reactive, hamstrung by whatever cash flow we had. If we were in a particular time where things were tougher, we just didn't pay ourselves. That's just sort of how we did things in those days. But the other thing that came along is when we realized that, not that we made the mistake, but we're for better or worse, we're a service-based company now. Like, that's what we are. So let's just own it and let's just become the best at what we're doing. That became our goal. And we were in a situation where we had 4 partners. We were getting a little bit older, and we had to think to ourselves, well, is this going to be a business where, is it a lifestyle business, or it's something that can be like sort of transformative in a way? And I remember we sat together and thought, is there any chance, we can each make $5 to $10 million out of this at some point in the future? It's unlikely, it'll be hard to do that. So we started thinking about an exit, or, for the first time in 15, 16 years, we actually thought about what is the end game. Are we still like 65-year-old guys still having fun here, just flying, And once we sort of crystallized that, and it all happened really quickly. We sort of just thought, all right, technically we either need to get investment or we need some strategic partner. And I remember just having a conversation with someone literally a few weeks after we decided that. And one of my friends just said to me, you know what, you should have a chat to the guys in Salmon. I know this is where they are on their journey. They suck at what they're doing, but they're very good at this. Again, literally met up for lunch, told this type of story. And within weeks, it's like, we'd like to buy your business. I remember coming back to the guys saying, guys, I know we never thought about this now, but we have this opportunity to sell our business right now. And Salmon were really good to us. They said, look, we're not looking to buy this and take it over. We'd buy, it's like kind of, I wouldn't say it was an acqui-hire, but it was like, we need to bolt this onto the business. We need this expertise. We need capability. We're struggling to hire. So we'd love to have you 4 guys and the quality people you bring on your team. But we want to do this over a 3-4 year period and, give you a big opportunity to grow it. And, it just sort of became like a no-brainer to us at the time. There was cash on the table up front to us. And I think that probably led to our exponential growth, because at that point, for the first time, we weren't worried about cash flow at all. They funded like just, our day-to-day cash flow. So we could hire people, you probably saw, we went from like our 300 square meter office to our 800 square meter office and all that type of stuff, But because we were laser focused on it, for the first time, we sort of part of me regrets it. Our deal was really great. Like they sort of bought 50% up front, and then we had these milestones, another 25% after, what became 2 years, and then another 25% of the 3rd year. And they were really fair in the sense they said, boys, if you go out there, whatever your multiple, whatever you do in revenue, we will pay you how we acquire businesses at 6.25 multiple, like something, something around those lines. So we want to incentivize you guys to really stay here and grow the business. And I think they structured in a really fair, equitable way for us. But it's amazing, once we actually had focus on doing it, we got to a point, by our last year, we were doing millions we were doing like 4 or 5 million in EBITDA profit. Whereas years below, we weren't even doing that in revenue, So we got to a point, once we had structure, I mean, it's not easy to maintain that, and it became really challenging. It would have been hard to continue growing at that velocity and still deliver. And as as you said, what were the problems we had? You guys were at the coalface, when it happened. When you sort of go from doing, 6 million to 15 million, in revenue in those days, like by 2014, 15, it's hard. We started falling short. We were probably over promising. We were taking on projects which should have probably been more. We made a few silly mistakes which put stress on you guys and the team, and that was just part of the learning experience with doing it. But as I said, it was good. I did it from the age of 19 to 2016. So it was 17, 18. Yeah, it was 18 years, like good friends out of it, incredible memories, and I learned a lot, and
it was a very you always think fun. When I speak to you and stuff, we always talk back of the stories of back in the day and stuff, and the craziness that was the Surrey Hills office, and then the shift into the Soundmat machine and so forth. And I guess
you guys would have seen that huge change. I mean, I love that it was we weren't cowboys, I mean, definitely not that. I mean, we really cared. But it was cowboys in the sense of when I look at the mature processes some businesses have, agencies and how they work, I think, holy shit, like, oh my God, I can't believe we did it like that.
That I have to say, with like the processes that we had back then was with Hamish and with the team in NSL. Like, although I think it became a point where it just became too much, but there was a point there where it was like the happy medium. The process was way ahead of its time. Way ahead of its time.
Yeah. Like, well, I think, and that's what you're right. Like, I think, as I said, when we went from like 6 million in revenue to the 10, 12 million at that point, you needed to have that, and that's where Craig did a really good job. Like from us, like he took a step back and realized that, Sean, myself, Michael, once you become part of a public company, there's hurdles to jump through, and there was process, and there was meeting after meeting and things like that. And it was hard. And Craig sort of put his hand up and said, look, boys, let me deal with that, all of that. And the other thing I'm going to handle is I'm not going to be involved so much client-wise anymore and sales or running projects myself, but I'm going to work with the Sams in our team and Hamish, particularly. How do we try and bring in all these SOPs and process so we can make this more formulaic and a more a uniform delivery process? And he did a really good job. To be honest, I think what made it hard was Magento. And like that's no shit on Magento now, because I'm talking about 2010 to 2013. It's a different beast. And I know with like Magento's still got its place. And I know it's got its own versions, and like there's not like just like Hybris does, and just like all these other platforms. But I think about it now, like, and that's why I'm so bullish about you guys. And I think you guys can have such an incredible business, like 10 times the size of what Netstarter was. If I was to start this again. Sean and I joke about it. We had one of our good, in the community, we had a good friend, and another wild success story. Tink, do you remember, Tink Taylor?
Oh, yeah, of course.
All right, so Tink, everyone knows Tink, the magician of the pie, like the most unassuming, legendary guy.
For those who don't know, that's Dot Digital. We used to be called Dot Mailer. Tink was the
Dot Mailer. Yeah, Tink was the fan, and again, similar story to us. Like early on, like being in it as long as we have. 10 times more success, 100 times more successful. But being in it when we had his own agency, the Dot, I think it was like the Dot agency or whatever it was at the time. And they kind of thought, well, we're pretty shit at the development side and like rolling out these websites. Like rewinding a story. This is even a bigger. Michael and I had this really early story where when he was at uni, this is the first time he got to know Scott Farquhar and Mike Cannon-Brooks. And in the early days, they used to have a web agency. Like they were doing web stuff. And I remember like going in for some projects and seeing them. And like it was like those early days where you'd sort of be in a meeting room before, and like you'd see the other person before you'd walk out. And I'm going back super early days. And I remember like we did this one website, the Australian Dental Association or something. I think it was the Australian Dental Association. And then afterwards, they chose us or whatever, and they said, look, there was a lot of great companies we reviewed, and they were one of them. And I remember thinking to ourselves, we'll show those little guys. We never lose a project. And like I remember Michael and I high-fiving and saying, all right, guys, good luck. Go back to doing whatever you're doing. Oh, yeah, go work on your little bug platform and see how that goes. And that's what they did. Like they kind of like fell out of the service-based side and became like, completely pot committed to this small little thing that became Jira and Atlassian, and the same thing happened with Tink, so they had their agency and was doing it, and in the UK at the time, realized there weren't really good mail platforms. They sort of built their own. I remember thinking like that's not going to get that much traction. But then they went like balls in on the whole thing. And that was it, and that became Dot Mailer, and Tink built that into a hugely successful. Still is,
Magento 2.0. Remember Magento 2.0 came with.
Oh yeah, they were like the native one, into it. Tink was an incredible, like he is like an ambassador. They built up. Then you look at like Klaviyo now, like even on steroids and how they've done it, But Tink built this, like hundreds of millions, worth of that business, in its prime. So, a legend. Yeah, a legend, incredible story.
So, look, we've only got 5 minutes left. There's 2 more questions I want to go through with you.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, you're like a triple OG in this game. One of basically the founders of the e-commerce agency space back in the day. What's your thoughts now on the current e-com landscape? Like, where do you think it sits?
Well, you just reminded me what Tink said to me when we sold, and I remember when we were finished. Michael had moved on. He had a great opportunity in a business, and he went on to do really good stuff. Craig became CEO of Rocked, another hugely successful business in Australia. And Sean and I were like umming and ahhing what we wanted to do with ourselves. And I knew I wanted to take a year off and just sort of do nothing. And I really thought I would take those sort of gun developers from the Netstarter and get into that, building a product, which I think I may do one day. And maybe I should have done in 2016. But then I thought, what, do I want to go raise money, go live in America, chase this? I don't care enough. Like I'm pretty comfortable. Let me have like a quality of life. I want to see the kids growing up and have fun. And but Tink said to us when we finished, I remember he said to Sean and I, he's like, boys, listen to me. You guys were good. Like I've worked with a lot of partners. You guys had like a little bit of magic to what you were doing, like your sales process, your relationships, the way you built a team. You had a great culture. And he said, I'm telling you, this Shopify thing is the future. And I remember saying to Tink, I don't have the headspace to ever do an agency again. And he said to me, I will bankroll it. I will fund it. You don't need to use any of your own money for this. Take it. I will help you. You guys will be like, we will do this together. We'll build a great. And I went to the US. I met all the guys, Toby, all of them in New York with Tink, and was really serious about doing it. We went to Shopify. Yeah, this is 2016, 17. We went over there we met like all the guys, and like Shopify were really keen, saying, look, at the time, the problem they had, and I know this has changed wildly from what it is today, but back then Shopify was very, very successful, but it was more like creatives and designers, agencies that were doing Shopify sites. They had no sort of pedigree in e-commerce, really. You didn't have like the E-Waves or the Overdoses didn't really exist yet, at that point. So they were in this weird situation where the bigger brands were starting to consider them, but they didn't know who to sort of give them to. So they said, look, we've got a couple over here in the US, but there's no one in Australia at this point, really. Well, there's not enough, there's not enough big ones. And we would love it if we could have this story of like ex-Magento guys coming back to the cloud-based space with your story, with your own platform, having developed yourselves. I reckon we can have you guys at $20 million a year within a year or 2 years. And you know what? I think he was right. I reckon had we done that, had I said, Sam, bang, we just built the team up. But part of me, we didn't want to do that to SoundMap. So SoundMap were in the situation where they weren't ready to, like they were invested in Hybris and Magento. They weren't going to, sort of changing the ship to go to like Shopify was a much slower process. Big change. Like a lot of our developers that we had, like the 50+ certified, were kind of redundant in a way in that regard. If you did that, so it didn't make sense. So Tink said, like, give it a year or two, and then like let's do it. And I think where you guys are at, man, and there's no excuse. You guys should be able to build an amazing business, because what you're able to do is you're able to deliver for clients. I'm not dismissing and saying there's not a space for a 200 to 500 grand website still. I know that happens, but there's also no reason a brand can't spend 20 to 100 grand and release a website in 6 weeks time, as you guys did with Glue Store. Like that was a really good example. So Hilton, who was like, I was his bitch for years, who he had JD Sport and, Glue Store, all of those. He called me up afterwards, and this could be one of our final stories because it's kind of funny. He called me up afterwards. Hey, so you boys have left. What's going on? And he said, these Magento bastards tell me I need to move to 2 and I need to spend like 80 grand a year on a license. He goes, nah, I'm not doing that. He says, what agency should I use? And I said, look, mate, like, to be honest, if you do this properly for Glue, it's going to be a big, a big project. So at the time, like I helped him do, a few of the Shopify sites just to help him. So I'd done them for my own business. And he said to me, mate, how are you doing these sites? Like, I'm doing these. I did a few of them for like 5 grand. Well, so particularly, he was really good to us, helping him out as a friend. And some of those, traded decent revenue considering the really, really small investment of time. And then he said to me, I need to redo Glue. And I was like, Hilton, I'm not doing Glue. Like, that's that. I knew it all too well. Big project, like it had Dolphin, this old ERP system in there, and everything in it. And they said to me, like, can this be done in 5 or 6 weeks? And I said, like, to be honest, it's going to be a big challenge. And he said, should we go to Magento? I said, no, I think you should use Shopify, but you're going to have to go out there. And I said, I don't even know. I said, you can speak to, like, there's a couple, I know the boys are working at Overdose, so I've got confidence there. I know there's 1 or 2 of the guys who are at Moustache, one of the others. talk to them, that they'll let you know. And they ended up working with you guys. And, I know you delivered it in a short period and, at a relatively small budget for a big brand like Blue. And I think that's where things have changed. Now the focus, I think, is you can stand something up in 3 to 6 months. You can do it really well, battle tested on a blueprint that works. And then you sort of take every available dollar, customer acquisition, Facebook ads, building your own internal team, resources. That's what I think you need to be doing, and ideally, if you've got, a trusted partner like Overdose or someone in there that can deliver that. I mean, are you guys doing all the Facebook ads, the acquisition side too internally?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're running out of time. So I'll probably just give you a call after this and finish this conversation because I really think we need a round 2 for this. I don't think one conversation is going to be enough. But yeah, look, we're full service essentially. It's we try and take care of our clients as best we can, and we fill every kind of gap that they have. So it's a really, really good place to work.
Yeah. So I think, and like you guys are really focused, like so you got sort of commerce tools, but Shopify Plus and BigCommerce are the SaaS-based platforms that are your sweet spot.
It makes total sense.
That's good.
All right, man. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure, mate.
It's been freaking great.
And just tell me one thing, is Sam really running the show there?
I know. It's horrible, isn't it? We need to do something about this. All right, bro.
Anyway, see you, mate. Pleasure.